A little girl goes silent after a terrifying night. No one believes her, except a retired police dog. What they uncover together. It'll break your heart and restore your faith. Willow Creek, Georgia, a small town nestled between ancient oaks and shadowy swamps, was a kind of place where time seemed to move slower than anywhere else. Weathered porches creaked in the breeze, rusted swing sets swayed gently like sleepy sentinels, and the scent of damp would mingle with magnolia floated through the streets. Here, neighbors didn't just recognize one another, they knew every bark in the night by name. But ever since one night more than a month ago, the air around Rachel Thompson's house had changed. The warmth that once filled her little home had been replaced by something quieter and colder. 7-year-old Layla Thompson used to be the kind of child who could light up the world around her. Her laughter had once echoed through the backyard as she ran barefoot through the grass, spinning like a breeze under the golden afternoon sun. She used to whisper bedtime stories to her stuffed rabbit, and she had never feared the dark, often dashing all the way to the end of the street just to catch the ice cream truck. But then, one night, something happened. Rachel didn't know exactly what, because when she returned from her overnight shift at the hospital, it was as if time itself had frozen. The front door was ajar, the lock undone. Rachel's heart clenched as she stepped into the pitch-black house, calling out to no answer. She found Layla curled up inside the hallway closet, trembling, her small body trying to disappear into the shadows. And from that moment on, Layla hadn't spoken another word. She didn't cry, didn't respond, didn't smile. Her wide eyes remained open but hollow, as if her tiny soul had drifted far from this place. The police came, combed through every window and corner. Nothing was broken, no signs of forced entry, no evidence suggesting anyone had been there. They were skeptical. They called it a false alarm. But Rachel knew. She knew something had stolen her daughter's voice. And whatever it was still out there, hiding in the dark. Every morning in Willow Creek began with bird song and sunlight filtering through the canopy of aging oaks. But to Rachel, the daylight was no different than the night, because the first thing she saw upon waking was the silent face of her daughter. Layla sat on the floor, back against the wall, clutching her threadbare stuffed rabbit. No mommy. No hugs, no sleepy-eyed mischief. Just silence. An aching, hollow kind of silence. Rachel had tried everything. The picture books that used to make Layla giggle. The green dress she once insisted on wearing for an entire week. Her favorite foods, mac and cheese, little heart-shaped pancakes, were served again and again in quiet hope. But Layla only bowed her head, pushing the plate away with small, lifeless hands. Rachel had called doctors. They diagnosed it as selective mutism, a reaction to trauma. She took Layla to a child therapist who tried to draw with her, read to her, even played her old favorite cartoons. Nothing worked. Layla remained silent, as if she lived in another world, a place Rachel couldn't reach, couldn't enter. The town slowly turned its back. At first, the neighbors came by with kind words, cookies, and prayers. But as the weeks passed, with no sign of a break-in, no suspicious footage, and Layla still mute, the visit stopped. People didn't say aloud, but Rachel saw it in their eyes. Maybe she imagined it. Every night, Rachel sat awake on her front porch, staring out into the backyard where a dull yellow porch light spilled across the damp grass. She clutched a mug of cold coffee, praying for something, anything. A sound, a shadow, a flicker of proof that she wasn't losing her mind. But there was nothing, only the hum of insects and a slow-burning fear that her daughter had drifted into the dark, and Rachel couldn't pull her back. The sky over Willow Creek was overcast that day. A thin layer of gray cloud stretched like a woolen blanket across the town. Rachel was making coffee when a knock echoed on the door, sharp, deliberate. She opened it to find Detective Noah Carter standing there. Same worn leather jacket, same sharp eyes, though this time they held a flicker of hesitation. "Sorry to drop in unannounced," he said, "but I think there's something that might help Layla." Rachel narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" Noah reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a trifold brochure. On the cover were smiling children beside a variety of dogs, golden labs, border collies, German shepherds. Harmony Paws Recovery Center was written in soft blue letters. They specialize in therapeutic dogs, specifically trained to work with children who've experienced trauma. Rachel hesitated. Layla won't even talk to me. Exactly. Noah cut in, voice lower, steadier. There are things a child can't say to adults. But sometimes they find another way to speak. A week later, Rachel brought Layla, still silent, still clutching her worn stuffed rabbit, into the main lobby of Harmony Paws, nestled just outside the edge of town. The space was flooded with natural light, filled with a scent of pine wood and fir. From the room beyond, a soft bark echoed like a gentle hello. A middle-aged trainer stepped out, her graying hair pulled into a bun, and a warm smile creasing her face. Miss Thompson, I'm Dr. Margot Hale, director of the program. I have someone I'd like you to meet. A door opened, and stepping through was Max, a German shepherd with black and tan coat, tall and sturdy. A long scar ran down his left side, but his deep brown eyes held a strange kind of peace, as if he'd seen the world unravel and still chose to believe in it. Max didn't run up. He simply sat 3 feet away from Layla, waiting. Layla clutched her rabbit tighter, eyes locked on Max. 1 second, then 2. Then she took a small step forward. Her hand, almost unconsciously, extended outward. Max tilted his head, took 1 step closer, then gently touched his nose to the palm of her hand. Rachel felt her breath catch. That's how Max says hello to his first friend, Dr. Hale said softly, smiling. And I believe this is just the beginning. No one in the room said a word as Max gently pressed his nose to Layla's hand. There was no need. That single touch was enough. It was a whisper in the silence. I'm here, and you're not alone. Rachel stood frozen, as if someone had pressed pause on her entire body. She had seen her daughter flinch when a neighbor bent down to say hello. She had watched Layla sit for hours by the window, eyes vacant, staring at nothing. But now, right before her, Layla had reached out. Let them get to know each other, Dr. Margot Hale said gently, eyes never leaving Max and Layla. No pressure. They'll find each other on their own. And they did. In the quiet courtyard behind the center, under the shade of a wide oak tree, Max lay stretched out on the grass, head resting on his front paws. Layla sat beside him, her tiny hands gently stroking the thick, warm fur around his neck. Max used to be a narcotics dog, Dr. Hale said as Rachel approached with 2 glasses of cold water. He went into some of the most dangerous zones, followed commands with lightning-fast reflexes. But one day, he was stabbed protecting his handler. That scar is part of who he is. Rachel glanced through the window. Layla was drawing now, and in the picture, Max lay beside a curly-haired girl, with sunlight spilling softly over them both. He's not just a dog, Rachel whispered, her lips trembling. He's a miracle. As the sun dipped westward, Layla walked toward her mother, clutching the drawing in her hands. Without a word, she handed it to Rachel, then turned and reached out to gently tap Max on the head. A second touch. Max tilted his head, tail sweeping the grass in a soft wag of thanks. On the drive home, Layla still held tight to her stuffed bunny. But for the first time, Rachel saw her daughter turn around in her seat, gazing out the rear window, back toward the center, where Max still stood, as if guarding the gate to a heart that had just begun to open. And Rachel knew something had changed, truly changed. The next morning, after that emotionally charged first visit, Rachel brought Layla back to the therapy center. While Layla sat once again beside Max, her tiny fingers tracing his fur, her gaze no longer lost, Rachel met with Dr. Hale inside a cozy pine-paneled office. She's responding even better than I'd hoped, Dr. Hale said softly, sliding a file onto the desk. Max might just be the key. Rachel nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. If there's any way for Max to stay with her every day, there is, Dr. Hale replied with a warm smile. Max has completed all community reintegration tests. With initial supervision, your family can take him in on a temporary foster basis. And if the bond continues to grow the way it has, we'll consider making Max a permanent part of your household. Rachel gripped her hands together, eyes welling with tears. She looked out the window, where Max had just laid his head on Layla's lap like a knight who had finally found the one he was meant to protect. A few days later, Max officially moved in with the Thompson family. A dedicated dog bed was placed at the foot of Layla's bed, beside a bowl of water and a worn-out rope toy. From that night on, Layla no longer woke in the middle of the night with those distant, hollow eyes. Max was always there, steady, silent, and never leaving her side. Rachel had not been able to help her daughter with words. But now, she knew, Max's unwavering eyes and quiet warmth had begun to rebuild the bridge that could lead Layla home. Then the strange things began. For the fourth night in a row, Max growled, not loud but low, deep and persistent. The sound yanked Rachel awake instantly. Her heart pounding, she jumped out of bed. Layla was still sound asleep in her room, but Max was posted at the window, his entire body taut like a bowstring drawn tight. Rachel crept toward him, following his gaze. And then she saw it. A shadow flickering near the edge of the backyard fence. Not enough light to make out a face, but someone was out there, watching their house. This time, Rachel didn't hesitate. She opened the security camera app on her phone. A short video clip loaded, grainy with light distortion, but it was enough. A silhouette stood at the far end of the yard, barely 20 feet from Layla's window. The figure paused for a few seconds, then turned and disappeared into the woods behind the house. She immediately called Detective Noah Carter. "He came back," Rachel said, her voice shaky but clear. "I have video. No clear face, but it's him. I know it." Half an hour later, a patrol car pulled into the driveway. Noah stepped out, eyes sharp and alert. Max, usually calm, remained firmly in front of Layla, like a soldier guarding his charge. "Here," Rachel said, handing over a phone. Noah studied the video, his expression darkening. "Not enough to ID him," he said. "But this confirms your fear is valid." Layla said nothing. She sat quietly on the steps beside Max. But her eyes, those eyes, no longer looked afraid. They looked aware, as if she remembered something. Something she had never shared. "She's seen him before," Noah said softly. "And I believe she remembers." Max pressed his head gently into Layla's hand, as if waiting for a sign. But this time, it was Layla who gave the nod. The first sign, a door barely ajar, but also a warning. The nightmare wasn't over. That morning, Rachel found a single sheet of paper laid neatly on the kitchen table, beside a glass of milk that Layla never finished. Her daughter had drawn. The drawing was simple, but haunting. Layla stood next to Max in the backyard, and in the distance near the fence line was a shadowy figure of a man. No face, just a black mass, but on his right arm a long, deep red scar was clearly visible. Next to him was a van, its windows blacked out, and a swirl of jagged gray lines, as if Layla was trying to pick something she didn't have the words to describe. Rachel was speechless. That wasn't imagination. That was memory. Noah Carter arrived just 20 minutes after Rachel called. He studied the drawing silently, then looked up at her. She remembers. And this is testimony. Carefully, he flipped through the other pages Layla had drawn. One featured a blurry license plate. Only 3 characters were legible. Another showed a hand holding a knife. And then, the last one, a face. It wasn't drawn in full detail, but one feature stood out, a misaligned eye and a jagged scar running from temple to jaw. Rachel shivered. Noah froze. "I've seen this man." He pulled out his phone and searched through an old case database. Within seconds, a mugshot appeared. Curtis Madsen, suspect in a child abduction case 3 years ago. Insufficient evidence. Had disappeared since. And at that very moment, Max growled from the living room. Rachel turned to find Layla standing by the window, pointing outside. Max barked, loud, furious. Noah sprinted to the porch. A gray van was speeding away down the alley beside the house. The curtain hadn't yet fallen back into place. Layla still stood motionless, her eyes unblinking. "We've got him!" Noah shouted. Rachel grabbed her daughter, tears spilling freely. Though Layla still hadn't spoken, she had sounded the alarm louder than any scream ever could. Less than 48 hours after identifying the suspect as Curtis Madsen, the manhunt began. Using the partial plate from Layla's drawing and data from local traffic cameras, Noah Carter and the police traced a van. It had last been spotted heading down a dirt road west of Willow Creek, an isolated area near the town's edge, where even cell phone signals were unreliable. That afternoon, the investigation team approached a decaying wooden cabin. Its roof sagged, grass rose above knee height, and thick pine woods loomed around it. Max led the way, leash loose but body taut, each step heavy with purpose. Rachel didn't come with them. She waited at the station, gripping Layla's hand as the little girl quietly kept drawing. At first, the cabin was silent, no sign of life. But then Max stopped, ears up at a hatch behind the house. He sniffed hard the ground, then let out a single, sharp bark. Noah raised his hand. Down there, as they descended into the underground space, a rush of musty air hit them, metallic, stale food, mildew. Under the flicker of flashlight beams, a small noise echoed from the dark corner, the sound of chains. And then a hoarse, frightened child's voice trembled through the air. "Please, don't lock it again." The police moved, and immediately, a little girl, around 6 years old, her tangled brown hair matted and eyes wide with fear, was curled in a corner. She was Emily Vargas, the child who had gone missing 2 months earlier from Pine Creek, a town roughly 80 miles from Willow Creek. Curtis Madsen wasn't inside the cabin, but the evidence was unmistakable: rusted chains, a blood-stained cloth, and a frantic crayon drawing on the wall. In Emily's shaky handwriting, over and over, were the words, "Save me," alongside a sketch of a curly-haired girl. When the rescue team emerged from the rotting cabin carrying the frail, brown-haired girl in their arms, the entire Willow Creek police station erupted into motion. The moment the call came through the radio, tension snapped through the room like a pulled wire. "That's Emily Vargas," a stunned officer blurted. "The missing girl from Pine Creek." Rachel turned to look at Layla. The little girl still sat silently, clutching her stuffed bunny, but her eyes flickered like a storm passing behind clouds. Without a word, Rachel knew. Her daughter understood exactly what was happening. Later that night, in the trauma recovery wing, Emily, still trembling beneath her blanket, uttered something that made everyone freeze. "There was a girl, curly hair," she screamed when he grabbed me. The officers asked her again, gently. Emily nodded, tears in her eyes. "I remember she was in the van with me. When the door opened, she pushed me back into the corner and ran out. I heard barking, then he slammed the door. After that, he didn't take me away. He just kept saying, 'The other one ruined it.'" The pieces finally clicked into place. Layla had been the first target. Curtis Madsen had entered the house and abducted her. But something interrupted him before he could leave town. Spooked, he abandoned Layla and escaped with Emily instead. Rachel clenched her fists as the report was delivered. At that moment, Layla quietly reached into her pocket and pulled out another drawing, trembling strokes in red pencil. 2 girls inside a van, but only one walking away. At the bottom, written in messy block letters, "She stayed behind." Layla lifted her head and looked directly into Noah's eyes. For the first time in weeks, her gaze was no longer vacant. It was sharp, steady, as if she understood exactly what she had survived and what it meant. Behind her, Max stood like a sentry. The dog turned and locked eyes with Layla. No words passed between them, but none were needed. Silence fell across the room. Detective Noah Carter, who had been leading the investigation, finally spoke, his voice low, measured, resolute. "This girl didn't just survive. She's a witness." 2 days after Emily was found, the manhunt for Curtis Madsen officially began. Willow Creek PD, now working with federal agencies, combed through every possible lead: license plates, gas station footage, and cellular pings. But it was a small detail from one of Layla's sketches that unlocked the case's turning point. In the corner, one drawing, behind the van and the girls, was a sloped mountain, and beside it, a distinctive arched wooden bridge, something only a few locals would recognize. It was Ravenfield Lake. Noah Carter drove through the night to Ravenfield with a special response team. And just as the first light of dawn crept over the treetops, they found the target van, parked deep within a hidden forest trail, covered in dust and fallen leaves, as if abandoned. But the footprints nearby were fresh, and a faint thread of smoke rising from the chimney of a nearby wooden cabin betrayed the truth. The arrest was swift, silent, and offered no chance for Curtis to react. When the officers entered, he was sitting by the window, a cold cup of coffee in hand, as if he already knew it was over. Curtis didn't say a word as the cuffs clicked shut. He didn't resist, but his eyes, hollow and dark, were like a bottomless well that had swallowed everything. Back at the Willow Creek Police Department, Noah entered the interrogation room. Curtis simply looked up, quiet. No why? No denial. The overhead light cast harsh shadows across the table, where a single drawing lay among the evidence. The final sketch from Layla, she and Emily inside the van, and the words scribbled beneath. She stayed behind. Curtis stared at the drawing for a long while. Then, slowly, he lowered his head. He said nothing. That night, he hand-wrote a full confession, 4 pages long. The Willow Creek County Courthouse was packed the morning of the trial. The entire town seemed to hold its breath as they awaited justice for Curtis Madsen, the man who had haunted the dreams of children and the sleepless nights of their parents. Layla Thompson sat beside her mother in the witness section. At her feet, Max, the retired police dog, lay silent but alert, as if he knew this moment was his to guard. The defense tried to paint Curtis as a lonely, mentally unstable man, incapable of understanding his actions, but the courtroom had already begun to see through it, especially when Emily, the rescued girl, took the stand. Her medical report confirmed injuries matching Layla's drawings, including specific details of the van that only someone who had been inside could know. When it was Layla's turn, the room fell into complete silence. The little girl walked to the witness stand, her tiny hand still gripping Max's leash. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She simply stood there, her deep, unwavering eyes locked on the defendant. The prosecutor leaned in, gentle but clear. Layla, can you show us who in this room made you feel afraid? The silence that followed was absolute. Layla turned. Her small hand trembled and then pointed firmly at Curtis. Max stood instantly, ears raised, muscles taut like steel cables. Without a word or command, the dog stepped forward, barked once, sharp and cold, not an attack, but a declaration. Curtis went pale. His eyes darted away. His hands clenched under the table, as if he could shrink himself out of existence. A soft murmur rippled through the courtroom. The jury whispered among themselves. The judge banged the gavel, calling for order, but the weight of that moment was unstoppable. The prosecutor offered a faint smile and turned to the judge. Your Honor, the instincts of a professionally trained dog are never wrong, and our witness, though she hasn't spoken a word, has told us the truth. Curtis slumped back in his chair. Beads of sweat broke out across his forehead. Within seconds, a shudder ran through his body, and he collapsed forward, burying his face in his hands. In front of everyone, the monster in the shadows finally crumbled. Layla said nothing, but she had won, through silence, through her gaze, and through the unspoken bond of a loyal dog. 1 week after the trial, early morning light streamed through the windows of the little house on a quiet Georgia street. In the modest Thompson kitchen, the heaviness that once hung in the air was gone, replaced by a calm so gentle it could only exist after a storm has passed. Curtis Madsen had confessed. Every piece of evidence, from Layla's drawings, Emily's testimony, to Max's undeniable instinct, had become the perfect puzzle of justice. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. In Willow Creek, the story of Layla Thompson and Max, the retired police dog, spread like wildfire. No one could believe that the same little girl who once couldn't speak had been the one to break open a chain of hidden crimes, saving not just herself, but Emily, the girl who everyone thought was lost, and possibly other children who had not yet become victims. Rachel Thompson would always remember the moment Layla turned to her after the trial. Her daughter said nothing, but her eyes, clear and bright for the first time in weeks, spoke volumes. And on a quiet evening, as mother and daughter prepared dinner together, Layla gently placed her hand on Max's head and whispered, "Thank you." It was the second time she had spoken since that terrible night. Max looked up, licked her hand softly, his tail swishing gently as if he understood everything. Layla had not fought with words, but with courage, with drawings, with silence, and with faith in a four-legged friend who bore his own battle scars. She didn't need a shout to be heard. She only had to stand tall and let the light of truth speak for her. And the greatest lesson? Sometimes the strongest thing doesn't come from a voice. It comes from the courage to face the darkness, even while carrying wounds that have no name. Out on the porch, Layla was drawing again, but the pictures weren't dark anymore. Today's sketch showed a sunlit scene, a little girl standing next to Max, holding hands with Emily. No shadows, no fear, only hope. The afternoon in Willow Creek was as gentle as a spring breeze. Sunlight filtered through the old oak trees near the porch, streaming into the small living room where Layla lay with her head resting on Max's back. The retired police dog, once scarred by battle, now lay still like a soft, living pillow, steadfast and warm like the sky reflected in her eyes. Rachel Thompson stood at the sink, her hands washing dishes, but her gaze never strayed from her daughter. In the past few days, Layla had changed. She drew more, ate with more appetite, and started taking morning walks with Max. She no longer woke up gasping in the middle of the night, no longer stared out the window in fear. But despite the laughter, despite the drawings, Layla hadn't spoken a single word since the trial. Rachel dried her hands and walked over. She knelt beside Max, gently brushing Layla's dark hair from her face. "Would you like me to read you a story tonight?" Rachel asked softly, the same way she always had. Layla didn't answer, but she gave a small nod, then wrapped her arms around Max's neck. The dog let out a quiet, contented sigh, as if embracing them both. Rachel smiled gently. She turned to head back inside, when suddenly a sound as faint as wind through the leaves stopped her heart in its tracks. "I missed you, Mommy." Rachel spun around. Her heart dropped. Layla was looking straight at her. Those deep brown eyes held tenderness and vulnerability. She was still holding Max, but her lips had moved, clear, unmistakable. Rachel dropped to her knees. Tears spilled before she could stop them. She held her daughter close, her voice trembling. "I miss you, too, every single second." They stayed like that, wrapped in each other's arms, as the golden light of evening spilled across the porch and birds sang gently in the yard. No more words were needed. The silence that once swallowed Layla whole had finally dissolved. She had come back, not with a scream, but with the softest whisper in the world. Because love, patience, and belief can heal even the wounds we don't yet have names for.